going to read you the story of John Mary Vianney. St. John Vianney, the cure of Ars. Well, cure is a word for priest, and Ars is a little town in France. A tree branch cracked. The little troop stopped and listened to the noises of the night, and after a few minutes, Mathieu and Marie Vianney set off again in silence, with their 6 children following behind. And a few minutes later, the whole Vianney family was indeed gathered together in a back room of a building, along with many other families. A priest stood in the middle of the room celebrating Mass. Everyone had come in secret, having faced many, many dangers to get to this nighttime appointment with the Lord. For this was the time of the French Revolution, when many priests were hunted down and thrown into prison or killed. Mass was forbidden, churches were closed, crosses were destroyed, and yet many men and women went on praying and going to Mass. In front of this makeshift altar, John Mary said the Our Father in Latin. John Mary was 7 years old. He had not made his first communion yet, but his love for the Lord was already immense, and he had a deep desire growing in his heart. He wanted to be a priest. But until he could make his dream come true, John Mary had to help at home. Every day, he and his sister Marguerite would lead the flock of sheep to the valley. And while watching over the sheep and knitting woolen socks, he would tell his sister stories from the Bible, ones that his mother had taught him. And when he was finished, he'd run to the stream, and he'd take out a little statue of the Virgin Mary that he kept in his pocket, and he'd place it in a hollow of a tree, and he would begin his prayers. This little statue, the Blessed Virgin, never left his side. His mother had given it to him as a present because he had agreed to give his pretty rosary beads to Marguerite. To be a priest, that was John Mary's fondest dream when he grew up. But it was hard to make this dream come true. To be a priest, it was not enough to just love the Lord with all your heart. You had to know Latin in order to read the scriptures. And unfortunately, John Mary was not that good at school. He had trouble conjugating his verbs, and he had difficulties passing the exam to become a priest. He'd get his answers all mixed up. It was a good thing Father Bailey was there, for this priest begged that John Mary be allowed to take the exam again, and it was very unusual, but the examination board did agree. So he bravely went back to his books and worked until at last the exam day came about again. And this time he gave all the right answers, but the Vicar General in charge of the examination board wanted to know a little more. This John Mary Vianney, does he pray often? Does he pray well? To perfection, said Father Bailey. And the Vicar General scratched his chin, closed his eyes, and thought for a moment. And then he looked up and smiled as he announced, I accept him for the priesthood. The grace of God will do the rest. John Mary Vianney's dream had come true. He was ordained a priest in 1815 at the age of 29, and he was sent to a parish in Eckeley, near the city of Lyon, France, alongside Father Bailey. Chapter 2, The Village of Ars. There was lively talk in the village square. Have you seen the new cure? Asked one villager. I hear he's called John Mary Vianney, answered another, and he does look pretty young to me. Little Antoine Grieve met him first, said another woman. He showed the cure the road to the village, and the cure said to him, You've shown me the road to Ars, and I'll show you the road to heaven. A man standing in the doorway of the coffee shop sneered. The road to heaven? The cure is going to have his work cut out for him. It has to be said that the people of this village did not love the Lord very much, and ever since the Revolution, people hardly ever heard him mentioned anymore. The inhabitants of Ars preferred to go about drinking, dancing, and having fun rather than praying. And yet, almost everyone wanted to meet this new priest and went to his first Mass, mostly out of curiosity. He's not very tall, whispered one old man to an old lady, and he's not very good looking either. And his cassock, it's all frayed. Oh, I'm not surprised, said the woman. It seems there's nothing left in the rectory. He's given it all away, even his bed. Shh, complained another woman. Keep quiet and listen. And then something incredible happened. The new cure of Ars said Mass so earnestly, and he spoke so gently, and he prayed so beautifully Many of the parishioners were deeply moved, and they left the Mass completely transformed. "Our church might be a poor one of them remarked, but our priest is going to be a saint." In a few months, the village of Ars' opinion had changed completely. The good priest knew each one of the inhabitants. He took time to talk to everyone and to invite them to Mass and to confession. No one was left out, not even little orphan girls for whom he opened a school. And in his sermons, he called on each and every one of them to stop their drinking and their silly amusements and to respect the Lord. One Sunday, he came across a strange wagon on the road. A horse cart filled with hay was moving along without a driver. And having spotted the priest in the distance, the driver had hidden because he knew he shouldn't be working on Sunday and he would expect a gentle scolding from the priest. "Hold on," thought John Mary. "I recognize those horses. Stop hiding, my friend," he called. "I know who you are." And sheepishly the man came out of his hiding place. "Good day, Reverend Father," he mumbled. "Oh, I've caught you this time, my friend. But remember, even if I hadn't seen you, God always sees." The man decided he would not work on Sundays anymore, and he was not the only one. The parishioners started listening to their priest more and more. The cure of Ars did not want anything for himself. He slept on the floor with a stone for his pillow, and he would often skip meals, and if someone gave him a present, such as a new pair of shoes, he would give them to the poor and go on wearing his worn-out boots. On the other hand, though, he did want the most beautiful things for God, and he would travel as far as Lyon to get beautiful vestments to celebrate Mass. The church was transformed too. Father Vianney decorated it and enlarged it and paid for all the work himself. "This church won't be able to hold all who come here one day," he thought. And Father Vianney was right. Soon the little church was too little. But then the people of the village were not the only ones coming to Ars. People were coming from all over to attend Mass, for no one celebrated Mass like the good priest. For his love of Jesus was so strong, and it showed in everything that he did. He made the Lord present and alive for everyone. People would line up all the way down the street until late at night to make their confessions to him, and in the midst of the crowd, the cure of Ars could spot those who needed him most. One day he went out to find a woman who had not been able to get into the church. "You, madam, you're in a hurry. Come quick and make your confession." The woman was astounded. How could the priest, whom she'd never seen before, know that she had 16 children waiting at home? God had given Father Vianney the gift of seeing people's hearts. Miracles were starting to happen in his presence. There was, in fact, another woman in need of the cure of Ars. It was Mrs. de Volet. She had left her son, who was unable to walk, with a family in the village while she went to confession. And the priest noticed her in the crowd, and he said, "Come, you have the least amount of time to spare." Well, the lady went and met with the priest and made her confession, forgetting to talk about her son. "Oh, how stupid of me," she thought, and quickly she ran to get her child and brought him back in for the priest's blessing. "Oh, that child is too big for you to be carrying. Put him down to walk," said John Mary Vianney. "But he can't walk." "Oh, he will. Go pray before Saint Philomena." We'll talk about Saint Philomena in just a minute. The priest kissed the little boy, and then with great difficulty, he managed to walk as far as the chapel of Philomena. And an hour later, all at once, he stood up exclaiming, "I'm hungry!" And with all that, he ran to the door, where he suddenly stopped. It was raining outside, and he didn't have any shoes on, for what good would it have done him to wear shoes since he couldn't walk? Chapter 3. A Life of Sacrifice. In his confessional, the good cure would shiver in the cold or suffocate in the heat. His wooden bench was hard, but he refused to use a cushion. He would have hunger pains, since he rarely took time to eat. The cure of Ars did not want to lose a moment. There was so much to be done and so many people to bring the love of God to. The cure's days began very early. Sometimes he would be in the confessional as early as 1 o'clock in the morning for 6 or 7 hours at a time. He would listen, advise, comfort, and offer God's forgiveness. Next, he would celebrate the Mass with all his heart. Then he'd return to the confessional or to catechism. Father Vianney only had an hour for lunch. He would eat a few boiled potatoes, which served as his meal, and then the little bit of time he'd have left, he would sleep a bit, or visit the sick, or tidy his room. And he would pray, too, in the silence of his room. But by 1 o'clock, the cure of ours would be back in church and often stay until 9 in the evening. What a schedule. And at a pace like that, Father Vianney was wearing himself out. "Our cure isn't looking well," said one of the regular parishioners. "I wouldn't be surprised if he got sick." "It's true, he does look pale," added a woman sitting next to him. "But what is wrong with him?" Standing in the pulpit giving his sermon, the cure of ours did not feel well. He held on to the railings and collapsed. "Oh," gasped the parishioners, and they carried him back home. For 9 days he was between life and death, and when at last he was feeling better, he wrote to ask the bishop permission to leave. He hoped to retire to a monastery. But he had not figured on the love of his parishioners. They followed him down the road and begged him to stay until they finally got their way. The cure was never to leave ours until the end of his days. On July 30th, 1859, when he was 73, the cure of ours was still in the confessional at 1 o'clock in the morning. But his voice was getting weak, his speech almost impossible to understand. Completely exhausted, he went home to bed, and during the night, he asked for a priest. "I'm going to call a doctor," the woman said that was looking after him. "There's no point. The doctor can do nothing. The end is near," and he knew it. Horrified at the idea of losing their priest, the parishioners rushed to the rectory. They jostled in the stairway, crowding into the landing, trying to see him one last time. And on August 4th, 1859, John Mary Vianney gave up his soul to God. Ours had lost its dear cure. The church bells tolled. Men and women came from all over to pay him their last respects. 6,000 people traveled to his burial. There was the bishop and 300 priests there as well. For all of them, the cure of ours was already a saint. The way he celebrated Mass, his great kindness to all who came to him for confession, the miracles he had caused, the beauty of his teachings, all these things had led to the fame of this modest little cure all around the Lyon region. His fame was so great that in 1925 he was proclaimed a saint, and everyone was then able to learn of the wonders achieved by this man. The boy who had such trouble learning Latin became the patron saint of priests, first in France, and then for all parish priests throughout the world. What St. John Mary Vianney once predicted has never ceased to be true. The little church of ours is not big enough to hold all who go there. Pilgrims have continued to flock to the little village ever since the death of the good cure. Of course, they are no longer there to see the cure the way they used to, but they go to ours to ask St. John Mary Vianney to pray for them. So that's St. John Vianney. And our next saint is St. Philomena. And if you were listening closely, you heard that St. John of ours sent the mother with the child that couldn't walk to pray at the chapel of St. Philomena. And after they prayed, that little boy who had no shoes on his feet was able to walk. All right. St. Philomena is known as the patron of infants, children, and also a patron of priests. But I recently found a little piece of information about her in our Catholic Herald, which is the diocesan paper for the Diocese of Madison. And this is when I became familiar with her. I didn't even remember she was in this story until later. But it said Philomena is especially known to be powerful in cases involving the conversion of sinners, return to the sacraments, expectant mothers, destitute mothers, problems with children, priests and their work, and help for the sick, and many more. She's likened to Saint Rita and Saint Jude because she has become another patron of hopeless and impossible causes. So we talked about St. Rita and St. Jude in the last video, and now we have another saint known for helping with impossible causes. If you know somebody who's, left the Catholic faith or is thinking about becoming Catholic, she would be a great one to pray for that too.